I was in first grade and I woke up one morning and I said, "Mommy, I don't feel so good." But my mom was the skeptical sort, and she had a rule that you couldn't stay home sick unless you had a fever. So she got out the thermometer, and what do you know? I had a really high fever. So she bundled me back into bed and called the doctor. Now you're going to know how old I am. The doctor made a house call. And he diagnosed the mumps and told my mother to keep me home until I was well and there was no chance I would be contagious. So she sent a note to Miss Scott, my first grade teacher, by way of the boy who lived next door who went to the same school. And late that afternoon, he knocked on the door and handed my mother a big packet of homework that Miss Scott had sent home so I wouldn't fall behind. There were arithmetic worksheets, and nestled in there among the vocabulary lists, there was a page with a verse of a poem on it, and a note to my mom that said, "Please help Susie rehearse this for the school assembly at the end of next week. I hope she'll be better and be able to participate." And then, P.S., do not send her back to school until she is fully recovered. Well, I had forgotten about the school assembly, even though we had been talking about it in class, and I really, really wanted to be in it. It was my first ever school assembly. So I rushed through the rest of the homework, and then every day I practiced. I said my verse, those 4 lines, over and over. I said them to my father so many times. He said, "Susie, just speak clearly and loudly, you'll be fine." But I couldn't let it go. I woke up in the morning saying those lines. I put myself to sleep reciting them. I knew them backwards and forwards. There was just one problem as the days went on. The fever didn't fall. Every day my mother took my temperature, and it wasn't normal. Finally, it was the morning of the day of the school assembly. I was feeling pretty good, but I'd still had a slight temperature when I went to bed. But when my mom took the thermometer out of my mouth, 98.6. So off I went to school. And just after we said the Pledge of Allegiance, Miss Scott marched us down to the auditorium where the other kids, the older kids, were already in their seats, and the parents were back there somewhere in the back rows. Well, the principal said, Miss Scott's class will now share a poem with us about seeds. So 4 of us marched up on the stage, stood in front of the curtain, boy, girl, boy, me, and the first boy began. "Some seeds are big, some seeds are small, some seeds are flat, and some are like a ball." And I looked out and I saw people in the audience straining to hear, and I thought, he did not speak clearly and loudly. Well, the next girl got off to a better start. But she said, "Some seeds are foods, and the disembodied voice of Miss Scott came from behind the circuit. "Good to eat. Some seeds are foods and good to eat, corn, and beans, and nuts for a treat." I would have been pretty confident about this, but this, apparently being in an assembly, was harder than I thought it was, and I started to get a little nervous. And then the boy, the one right before me, he opened his mouth. Oh no! Well, now I really started to shake. I started to feel feverish again under the hot spotlights. I looked back. I knew my parents were somewhere in the audience, but I couldn't see them. And from behind the curtain, I heard, "Susie, your turn. Go." "But whatever the kind, or wherever it's found, most plants grow from the seed in the ground." And there was stunned silence in the auditorium. And then somebody snickered, and then one of the dads in the back let out a big guffaw, and pretty soon everybody was laughing uproariously, and they were laughing at me. And then they started to clap. They started to clap, and that applause just washed over me like a warm wave of approval. They were clapping for me. I didn't notice that the other students had left the stage until Miss Scott came back up, grabbed me by the hand, and led me off. So later, in the lobby, when the parents and the teachers and kids were milling around, I found my dad, and I tugged on his jacket and said, Daddy, why were they laughing? And he put his arm around me and said, Susie, you were the only one we could hear. It was kind of funny, but I'm so proud of you. And that's when I learned that it's good to speak up, and it's good to be heard, and it's okay if they laugh even when you weren't expecting it. I didn't get up on the stage to tell stories until I was in late middle age. But the seed was planted then. I can pinpoint the beginning to first grade.